I get asked quite a lot, actually, how do I make my rockets look the way they do? So I wanted to make a video on how I do it, some of the techniques I can potentially pass along, and some of the methods I've come up with over the couple years I've been doing this to make rockets that look really, really good and match their full-scale counterparts, basically. So flying them is one thing. I really love making the aesthetics match the real deal as much as possible because it really adds to the visuals. So what I usually do as a base is I'll try and go to AXM Paper Space Models. This is a website. All the models are free. It's done by an awesome guy out of Port St. Lucie here in Florida who just really loves spaceflight. So he makes paper models of all sorts of rockets with incredible detail that you can print out and glue together using just cardstock, paper, and Elmer's glue. So for my Falcon 9, I actually reference his model as a decal that I apply to the tube that I use. So I prefer the DM2 skin here. It has the NASA worm, which is the best logo, and the Crew Dragon, which is a really cool looking spacecraft, and it really tops off the rocket with a lot of relief and detail work there. He did a great job setting up this model, and I give him full credit for that. I just take what he has on the download section here and work with his PDF to try and turn it into something that works with my rocket. So I've rescaled it and I print it out. You can print it out on standard A4 letter paper. And the end product just has to be large enough here to fit around the tube that you're going to use. So I went in and tiled all the pieces in Microsoft Word using the snipping tool and his different panels that he has there. So what you're going to do is cut out all your pieces once you're all printed out. This uses a lot of paper and a lot of ink, so you got to be ready to go. But luckily it keeps the overall white aesthetic, so it's not too heavy, but some of the black sections really use a lot of ink, so I don't do this very often. Once you've got all your pieces cut out, you're going to take and lay them out to make sure that everything covers end to end. Sometimes I'll do a special blank section where I can overlap and add filler where needed so that all the panel lines work together and line up. The nice part about the Falcon 9 model that he has on his website is it has a lot of great details for setting up the alignment. So that raceway there on the side is a nice perfect straight line that you can use and line up on your vehicle. So I've already tiled these blueprints here from the model, and they're available through Patreon, and I'll make sure I link that. So that I've done the effort if you want to replicate this rocket as well. So what I like to do is lay things out and make sure everything matches. Once it all is together, we can take and trim things to fit. So one of the things you have to be conscious of is where the lines on your tube meet the couplers. I'm using Apogee 3-inch or 76 millimeter tubing. So I have sized my pattern to fit so that it fits just barely all the way around the airframe there. And I've planned my airframe so that most of the parts fit in the lower section. It really pays to have a CAD model of everything, but because I've already done that, I'm just showing here how I line everything up. So a lot of the model there is corresponding with the placement of the different components in the airframe. So I am working to try and make sure that everything fits and mocking it up, which really pays off when you go to make your cuts. because your decals have to go on first, and then everything kind of lays out after that. Once your decals are on, you can start drilling your holes and making sure everything fits. So here I'm laying out the forward bulkhead for the parachute, the ring that goes on for the fins. I have one of the fins on the forward airframe there by the inner stage, which is going to be black to match that section. And one of the things that I wish was a little different, and on my older version of Rocket, I had laid out a little differently, was the logos. So the SpaceX and NASA worm logo I have going across the coupler, which we have to be really conscious of, but we can make work nonetheless. So the way we're going to adhere everything on is some 3M45 spray glue. This stuff is awesome and I love it. A little goes a long way. I'm still on my first can that I've purchased in the last couple years. So it really does the work, and it sticks so well. You just got to make sure you shake it up, decap it, and this is what we're going to use to adhere our decals onto the airframe. I like to use some sort of like plastic bag. You can use cardboard, anything to work on, so that when you spray, you don't have any problems with getting the glue everywhere, because it does stick. It makes everything tacky. It's not too bad. It's not as bad as like a spray paint, but it does get everywhere. So what I've done here is I've gone in and I've marked out where the aft skirt is going to be. I line that up with the slots on the lower section of it, and I just draw a pencil line right around there so that I can line up the very first decal, because how you place the first one is going to impact all the downstream decals. So I do a nice light coat holding one side of the decal, try and get the edges in the corners. That's probably the most important part. And once you get yourself all the way out to the one corner, make sure that first edge is nice and well coated. It feels very tacky once you have it, so I always do a little stick check on my own finger, and then go in and begin rolling it onto the tube. So this is super critical on the first one to make sure it's all lined up. I did a really great job at framing this, so you can see the back of my head great, and the tube not at all. So just kind of imagine here that I'm right on that line that I plotted out. You start at one end, that first end that you put the most glue on, because that gives you the most time to work with it. And then I just apply it and roll it slowly in the direction of slack. Your goal is to smooth it as you go, and not try and apply all of it at once. You have a little bit of work time with this glue, and I'm using a metal piece of shears to rub the decal down flat to the surface. Your goal is to go nice and slow and make sure that the decal is fully applied so that the surfaces are right on top of each other and there's no bubbles or wrinkles in the decal, because it's paper and it shows a lot when you get a wrinkle. Next, we're going to apply this one. This decal is supposed to come out where the tip of the legs lines up with those little half crescents. It's pretty much the same procedure here. We're going to apply to the edge on the bottom where we're going to meet, and a lot on the first edge that we're going to stick down. So it's a light coat everywhere, get it nice and tacky, and then same process of rolling it on slowly onto the airframe. Getting a little bit of excess glue onto the airframe is pretty helpful because it gives you more work time with this adhesive, and it makes sure that everything is pliable while you're trying to get it into place, because you don't have long, but you do have a little bit of time here. So what I'm doing is I'm using my black line here to align the two segments of decal. I have a little bit of overlap, maybe about a 4mm edge here between the two decals that I'm trying to line up. And then I'm just letting it rest on a pencil line that I have that runs all the way down the two tubes as my reference line for this raceway. So once I get that started, I'm going to use my hand to smooth slowly the one side, and then work that around to the other side, and be using like a harder object like a credit card or a ruler, or in my case, a pair of shears, to slowly massage the paper onto the tube. I don't really do any surface prep on the tube other than maybe a light scuff with some high grit sandpaper. The tube that I use is a cardboard tube, so it actually accepts the paper and the glue really, really well. So applying like this gives you great adhesion right away. With the first layer and the second layer applied, you want to make sure that you have no wrinkles, your line looks good. And here I'm just kind of making sure all my work came through okay, and the blank line there on the one side is coming through good. Now it looks like it's good to continue to the next one, but we're gonna have to be real cognizant about that gap there and make sure that this is all pushed together as close as possible when we apply the next layer of decal. So to make sure that everything's nice and smooth, because I have reused this particular tube before from my earlier versions of my Falcon 9, I'm just scuffing it up to make sure that everything fits together nice and smoothly. If you're using brand new tube, you may not have this problem, but it's really good to make sure that everything is nice and smooth across the joint there, or you're going to notice it. And now at this point, we're just aligning the line we have on our tube here with the raceway line, like I said. Make sure the tubes are nice and held together. And at this point, we're just making sure everything is square, because this one, you will notice any problems if they pop up. The decal's pretty forgiving. The detail work on it makes it really, really hold up when you look at it up close. But we're going for perfection here, so trying to align to a reference line on the airframe is the best way to make that happen. And again, smoothing out as we go. Later on, after this is all dry, we can come back and cut through some of the lines on the segments between the airframe there, and that'll free the coupler from the rest of the tube and allow us to disassemble the rocket again. But for the time being, the decal will actually fuse the two pieces together, and we'll lose the ability to take it apart. This is okay though, so we're just making sure we make it as straight and smooth as possible. Your fingers do a really, really good job at detecting if there's any bumps throughout this whole process too. I ran into a couple bubbles in the process here, so it took me a while to smooth it out. But here's the finished product, and now we're ready to go on to the next one. So this is a blank strip. This is just an extension that goes on to get us to the forward set of airframe there. The whole tube is already the right length, I believe. So as we apply decals here, we're just making sure that we have the right proportions as the actual Falcon 9 rocket here. I ran into a little bit of surface contamination there, so I had to pull a hair out of the glue of the previous layer there, but not too big of a problem. This happens from time to time. So next up, we're going to the forward section right before the interstage. This is right before our black segment of airframe there. And if we're trying to reach the edge of the tube, we just need to do a quick mock-up to make sure we're in the right place to end up on the right length of overall tube here. So we're kind of gonna work a little backwards from the end. Like I said, I've pre-cut the tube to the approximate right length here and created a little bit of overlap. So I'm just making a little note there of where my decal needs to end up and making sure that we don't burn too much length on the overall tube and it all comes out the right proportions. So this decal is second to last. And by now you get the overall flow. Spray glue, try not to spray your fingers. Get the edges and the corners, make sure it's all nice and coated. Remove any excess spray glue that you're spraying on from the area. Bring in your nice clean tube and match up to that reference line so that everything is in line and good to go. You can see my pencil line here too. And my reference point for how much overlap the two decals will need. Because I built this with more than enough overlap to reach the right length here. And you can see it's a little forgiving on sticking down and re-sticking here because this one needs to be pretty perfect to line up with the black inner stage decal that we're going to put on next. So at this point, things are getting pretty far along here. We just have one more decal ready to go. Thus far, the tube looks really, really good. The white paper look gives it a little bit better of a color tone towards the actual flight vehicle than the bare tube there. And then a lot of paints I've found just because it comes out a little better. Now, this last decal, same process as we've seen. We're just smoothing it out, making sure everything's nice and around there. There's a little bit of lack of decal there to make it all the way around. I may have had my scaling just a hair off on meeting that full 360-degree wrap, but that's not too bad. We can fix that with either permanent marker or paint down the road here. The main thing is all the actual decal stuff goes on correctly. The black shows any bubbles really, really well, so you can see me taking a lot more time to make sure everything's nice and smooth. And the way I'm using the scissors here is just as an applicator to make sure everything's nice and smooth. So at this point, all the bubbles are out. The airframe is completely covered in decals, and you get this really, really nice, super detailed finish, showing all sorts of rivets, color changes, connection points, and this other raceway on the opposite side, which we're going to actually color in using Sharpie, and we're going to use to run our actual electrical wires. So we're going to leave that blank for now because we have to glue to it. I got a little bit of bubbles there on the black, you can see, so I'm just going to come back with the scissors and try and smooth that out because, like I said, it is pretty forgiving, and you'd be surprised some of the paper you can get to stretch and move around even after it's been adhered for a couple minutes. But you can tell I did a good job on this one because we ended up right at the edge of the tube, which we'll use a razor blade to trim off that millimeter or so of excess there. But overall, this is the whole process I use for applying decals to all my rockets. This is true on the Spica rocket, the SLS, and of course the Falcon 9 here, which uses it the most basically. I've built a couple decals for some of the different rockets I've built. New Glenn has its own as well, but that one I have yet to really publish. So once we're ready to prepare for disassembly, we're going to look for the seam between our segments here. We're going to take the sharpest razor blade we can find and start marking it and punching through the paper, because the paper is the only thing holding the two slots together. And you have to be really, really careful here as you're going around, A, not to cut yourself, and B, not to cause a problem by cutting diagonally out of the groove or making a new cut on the actual rocket airframe. So I'm holding it by the edges here while I just rotate the airframe slowly in my hand and let it slice through the paper. And you get a nice clean cut at the edge of the airframe. And this is what allows us to work on the rocket and separate it at a coupler. All of these decals are sized for a 76 millimeter airframe or 3-inch tube available from Apogee rockets. It's a pretty standardized size, and you can tweak the overall scale up and down to make things work differently. Once you're done, you should have a nice 360-degree cut there. Your lettering will get a little disturbed as you disassemble it, so when we move on to airframe assembly, we're going to need to make sure that all of those little cuts and decal segments are aligned really well. So this is the second video too in my series of building my Falcon 9. So hopefully this helps you understand the next step in assembly process for these rockets, and gives a little insight into making your own rockets look a little better. The nice part too is you can make your own decals in like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, whatever, using the actual sizing that is available to you. And that's how I apply all my mission patches, logos, and everything to the airframe. So it really pumps up the look of your vehicle, and it gives it a nice, clean aesthetic. The other nice thing is it is a lot easier than doing all the paint and masking traditionally. So I highly suggest it. Like I said, the decals are all available on my Patreon drive. So I will have that link in the description of this video. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.